called Men Speak, Your Breath and Anger Management. So about Light of Loving Kindness, who we are. Light of Loving Kindness is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're located on the south side of Chicago. And what do? We provide access to hope, health, healing, and wholeness through holistic integrative solutions and through mindfulness-based interventions. We provide workshops, education, training, and resiliency services to communities that are considered to be underserved or underrepresented, communities with low income, and also those communities who have been affected by trauma in the Chicago area. And why are we doing this? Why One Breath Chicago? There are a lot of reasons why One Breath Chicago. Muriel may speak for just a moment about One Breath Chicago as our COVID response. But because it's time, really, it is time for us to put our mental health on the forefront. The days of hiding from one's mental health and pretending that things don't exist, those days are over. And there are things that we can do today, starting like right now, there are things that we can do. Starting here, if you're in Chicago with us or anywhere that you are around the world. So we hope you enjoyed this panel today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like and follow and subscribe and all of those things around social media platforms and on YouTube as well. All of these replays can be found on our YouTube channel as well. Next week, we will have a panel called Women Speak, and the topic is your breath and anger management as well. We hope that you will join us for that. And finally, I want to ask if you can donate to One Breath Chicago. We would appreciate it so very much. We want to keep our programs free. We want our programming to be available for free to people who need it the most, but who may have access to it the least. And any amount that you could give, we would really, really appreciate it. How can you do that? You can go to lightoflovingkindness.org, onebreathchicago.org, or go to any of our social media platforms. So thank you so much for listening. And now I'm going to turn you over to Muriel Baptiste, who is the Executive Director of Utopia Connect Foundation, our partner in this project. Muriel?
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you. I'm really excited today to hear our men in Chicago speak about how we manage our anger through the breath. And the Utopia Connect Foundation, I'll share with you a little bit that we believe that collaborative efforts are the way that we can actually impact our community in greater ways. And that's why we're collaborating with the Light of Loving Kindness on this project. Our goal is that we are 501c3 nonprofit as well. And we believe that our community matters and finding ways to make our community well. And during this time, it's really important to figure out what we can do to help our community cope during these tough and trying times. One of the guests that we have with us today is Build Chicago. And it's an organization that focuses on intervention and prevention, and they work with young men. And I thought today was a perfect day for our young men to be present. So Build is in the house today. So definitely know that, you know, you're speaking to young men who really need to know how to cope during this time. And I think about our summers as well. And as we move into, I know it's not even spring yet, but as we move into summer, it's one of the deadliest times in Chicago. And managing our anger is so important during that time. So definitely speak to our young men today. Thank you, Build, for being present. We appreciate you. Thank you, Cassandra, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Muriel. And now I would like to introduce to you Daryl Satcher, who is the facilitator for the panel discussion today. So, Daryl is a performance art storyteller and a wellness specialist. He created A Leading Man to enlighten and empower young people to become the director of the film in their heads. Blending arts and wellness, Daryl considers himself to be a love and light being. And now, without further ado, I will turn it over to Daryl and the panel.
Hello, let's meet the rest of our panel, shall we? First, we have Dr. Obari Cartman. He is a father, son, brother, uncle, writer, therapist, photographer, drummer, and grassroots mental health advocate. Dr. Cartman is the program director for Real Men Charities Incorporated, where he facilitates weekly men's wellness and African drumming circles. He is also the current president of the Chicago Association of Black Psychologists. Dr. Cartman facilitates trainings for adults and workshops with youth about maintaining good mental health, critical analysis of hip hop and media, racial and cultural identity, developing authentic manhood and healthy relationships. Dr. Obari Cartman. Next up, we have Frank Mitchell. Frank Mitchell is an art director, multidisciplinary artist, and dedicated yogi, and teacher. He holds a BFA from the School of the Art of Institute of Chicago and a certification with Yoga Alliance, and has studied Bikram, Ashtanga, and Kemetic Yoga. Next, we have Christopher Thomas, a former Marine with 15 plus years of entrepreneurial and leadership experience with 10 years in HR and staffing. His greatest aspirations in life are to provoke change in the world, help people live out their passion, and improve the way communities live and work. Chris is the founder and CEO of Your Passion First, a mentoring program focused on inspiring young adults to find, define, and follow their passion into the workforce. Next up, Dr. Larry Turner, a licensed clinical psychologist, registered nurse, substance abuse therapist, and certified yoga therapist. He has worked with survivors of traumatic experiences in Chicago and the worldwide community. He is the founder of the Therapeutic Inventory Institute. In Chicago, he has developed programs for traumatized children and adolescents in hospitals, schools, and churches. On the global scale, Dr. Turner provided medical and psychological services to victims of Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita in 2005. He was in Haiti after the Haitian earthquake in 2010 and in Sierra Leone as part of the worldwide Ebola response in 2015. Last but not least, we have Mike Zalfo. He is the founder and originator of Samapati Yoga, which includes teachings from all of the schools of yoga he has studied in over 34 years of practice: Bihar, Himalayan, Vinyasa, and Ashtanga, and Bikram, to name a few. He has studied, practiced, or taught these various forms of yoga since 1984 and is a certified yoga instructor. He is the owner and director of the Yoga Room in Crown Point, Indiana. Welcome to our panel. All right, so let's get started here with the first question. Well, first of all, how you all doing today? How are you all doing?
Man, thanks for the check-in, brother. Thanks for the check-in. You know,
never
honored
better
to be on the phone with these amazing gentlemen, you know, trying to just really dig in and figure out how we can help some of these young people out there, and
yes,
you know, even help some of these older folks like ourselves, right, that are a little more senior. It's about mentorship too, and being able to pass along some of the challenges that we may be going through and pass those along to these younger bucks. So I'm thankful, appreciate all y'all.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Yes. How is everyone else doing? I want to hear from everybody. A quick check-in.
This is Obari. I'm doing good. Life is good.
I'm grateful to be invited to this conversation and sit amongst such powerful men, brothers, in the light and in the love. So I'm ready to get this going. I'm excited about this.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Welcome. Good to have you here. Larry, how you doing?
Never better, my brother. Never better. It's great to be here. I'm glad we have a group of young men that we can speak to, and hopefully they can get some of the things that some of us had to learn by experience, and hopefully they can avoid some of the things.
Yep. Mike, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Honored, as others have said, to be a part of this group, and hearing the accomplishments of this group already is just humbling to me. So I'm grateful to be considered with these other men. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank, how you doing?
Doing well. Humbled and honored here. I feel like I've abandoned you all a little bit. I'm in Florida right now, and
Hey!
and I'm enjoying that. So I'm humbled and grateful for that. So, but I'm there in spirit, right?
Well, a little jealous of your situation, but good to have you here at the same time.
Absolutely.
Good. All right, let's get started. So my first question to the panel is this. This question is for Dr. Turner. You are a clinical psychologist and a registered nurse. Let's start this discussion with you. How would you answer the question of how you handle anger when you feel like it may be boiling up?
Well, since I'm an older guy, now I'm able to recognize the symptoms of it. And let me put this step back a minute and say, like, on a physiological level, anger it's a feeling, an emotion that comes when you are not getting what you want. Maybe in veterans, sometimes it's from flashbacks, the feelings associated with memories, when your needs aren't getting met. And it can dominate you. And if you don't recognize it, it can cause you to do some catastrophic things that can impact your very life. So over the years, I have learned. So I know when I'm angry now. It's a feeling. And tell me to shut up when it's time for me to shut up.
You good, brother. Keep going.
The feeling, it becomes this. When, as a young man, being angry and not showing that anger was considered manly. That's what you do. You don't cry, you don't frown, you just take, whether it was a fight or emotions, you didn't know how. So when you become a man with that training, you don't know how to handle these things we call feelings. And so then at some point, some of us learn that, hey, it's okay for me to be soft. I don't have to walk around life like this all the time. I can walk around with my arms open. I have to be weary of things, but I don't have to let defense and anger dominate me. I have to learn to recognize my feelings, and the breath is a very important part of that, because if I can stop long enough to inhale and to exhale, I got a chance to recognize that feeling. But someone has to teach me that it's okay for a man to express that I can have a tear shedding out of my eye, that if I let that side of me not grow and prosper, as I get older, I'm living life with a very narrow framework. So that's how I know when I'm angry or if I'm disappointed, or as a parent. When my 13-year-old is not cleaning up the bathroom like he's supposed to, or cleaning up his room, and he says he's cleaned his room, and I look in there, or if I'm in a hurry, I know when I'm in a hurry, let's go, let's get in the car. I'm feeling frustrated that he's not feeling my urgency. Mm-hmm. And so then when I have to repeat as a parent, it's like, man, if I snatch him and bring him with me, I got him and he's in the car. But that's not the appropriate response. I recognize that that's me wanting to dominate the situation. And I'm smarter than he is. I don't act that way all the time, but I am, you know, and I definitely don't feel that way all the time. So the thing for me is to be aware of my feelings so that I don't act in an angry, frustrated manner. And it's a training that you have to go through. It's like anything else. You have to recognize that you have something, that you have fear, and that you can conquer it. That is just there. So we got a lot of talented brothers on here. And Mike, I'll just shut up.
No, I thank you. I thank you. Mike, I'm gonna come to you next. You've been practicing mindfulness and yoga for almost 30 years. I mean, you gave up your practice to help people heal people. And you facilitate workshops with men dealing with rage and anger. So I'm gonna ask you about rage and anger. So in your experience, how can you tell the difference between anger and rage? And why is it that men will often display their rage to partners and family rather than communicating through the anger?
Yeah, great question. And like anybody, I don't have like a definitive answer to that, but I always think about there's like various layers and levels to anger, like degrees almost, with, you know, impatience and being infuriated and being spiteful or being jealous, and all the way to the other extreme of like acting out, harming yourself, harming other people. You know, that's generally where that continuum is as far as like anger to rage goes. The second question is just, you know, I learned this in grad school years ago, and it was always like applying it to my own life was kind of interesting. The thing I learned was that all of us, male or female, young or old, we tend to pass on our pain to somebody more vulnerable than we are. And when I thought about that, like in my life, what I call the father wound that I had from my childhood, you know, the PTSD that I had from something that happened to me very young that I don't even remember, bringing that internalized anger, not even knowing where it was. And then when I get older and meet my wife, and then when we first had our kids, then this stuff started to come up for me. So it was always bizarre to think, okay, it's normal and natural for you to pass on your pain to somebody more vulnerable. I've thought about that over the years, you know, and I just think about it. For my experience of life has been, most of the time, people rarely go out on the street and pick a random stranger and unload to them. You know, we're going to do it, at least I'm going to do it in the privacy of my home, to my kids or to my wife. And I was lucky enough to have a professor who's my mentor, who's from India, born and raised in India. And he's still alive, 95 years old. And he told us a story one time. He said, here's the ideal. The ideal is you're angry and upset with your partner, and you're giving her all that verbalization you can and animation you can and everything, and you're done expressing your anger, and she says, is there more? And then you go back at it and everything. So that's the ideal. Well, I said, most of the time, if my wife said that to me, I might have, you know, put my arm up at her and saying, if there are more, she's being sarcastic when she means that, because it's like there's so much anger that was inside of me. But over the years, what I've learned to realize, where compassion and love and understanding and patience come in, is recognizing that I don't want to pass on my pain to somebody more vulnerable than me, meaning directly the people in my home, my wife and my kids, people closest to me, nor do I want to do it to strangers, right? I want to deal with it. And that's where yoga kind of systematically helped me with yoga breath work and meditation, and a thing called yoga nidra, which is an important thing that helps with PTSD, to begin to more appropriately be aware of my anger, and then to channel it, because it's a positive emotion. You know, it can be a positive emotion because of the energy behind it. So, yeah.
All right, Dr. Cartman, got a two-parter for you. As a clinical psychologist, how can a man determine when to walk away from an altercation? And why does it seem that in our society, is it more susceptible for men to show their anger over other emotions?
I'm a community psychologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist. It is professional distinction that makes a big difference. No problem. The first question, when to know to walk away. I appreciate this conversation about just the combination of anger in men and our bodies and our socializations in particular. I focus a lot on Black male mental health. I see most of the panel are men that probably identify as such. And I think that question about how to deal with anger, I think a lot more on a collective scale in terms of us as a group of people as Black men than I do in an individual way. I think in an individual level, particularly to Mike's point, if it's someone that you care about that you may perceive of as more vulnerable, it's certainly not okay to dump your anger on that person. I also think that it's important for us to be aware of the source of the violation that created the anger, so that even if it's block to block, even if it's man to man, even if it's, somebody steps on your shoe and in that moment they trigger a perceived disrespect, and then you feel responding like your manhood requires, your ego is performing a dance at that point, that even in those moments, I think that we have to be more careful, take more breaths, and analyze the situation, and consider the possibility that a lot of our pent-up anger as Black men in particular has to do with historical trauma, systemic violations. And to that point, that anger is justified, but that's not the kind of anger I want us to breathe away or to manage or to cope with. We need to respond to that kind of anger, because there's real actual harms that are done to us continually that if we don't address and if we don't organize and be active against and create new conditions for, then that violation will continue to harm us in ways that we would just be reacting amongst ourselves, creating more chaos, more harm, more violence. I appreciate the sister bringing up the attention to the violence in the summer. We didn't deal with the problems that created the rise in children being shot last summer. We're going to see it again, but it'll show up in different ways. So right now it's in carjackings, right? It's going to show up somehow, like that pent up anger, the powerlessness, the rage bottled up without being able to express itself is going to show up somehow. I think a lot of the bullets are tears on the street, right? They show up somehow. And part of the, and I'm beginning to the second question now, part of the work for us as men is to help guide younger men in this world of emotional intelligence, of being able to, as Dr. Turner was suggesting, taking a breath to find in our bodies where the feelings are and develop a knowledge of self that extends beyond like identity and name and place, but like fundamental knowledge of how your body moves, where tension sits in your shoulders, your heart beats in a certain situation, if your stomach is nauseous, like where or your legs might be shaking. We need to recognize these body signals and then distinguish the emotions that are connected to those triggers. And for men, a lot of us couch all of it as anger. But if we can tease it apart and say, well, I can express anger because that's what I've been given permission to express, but it's really actually embarrassment. You deal with embarrassment different than you deal with anger. It might actually be sadness. It might be grief. It might be shame. It could be loss. It could be so many other range of things that men don't have the permission to experience because we think these are women emotions or they don't belong to us. But if we can distinguish what we're feeling, what caused that feeling, and then have a scientific way of being able to respond to it piece by piece, I think that we're in better positions. We can advance and evolve, be more sophisticated and complicated because, the world is always going to be coming at us in different ways. And if we just have, as Dr. Turner says, this rigid, narrow response to it, then we miss out on the range of things that we need to do to navigate this place that's going to cause a range of emotions. This is going to need a range of responses. And so we need to help young men identify that in themselves, label it, find it in their bodies, and then find responses to it that are more healthy than the reacting to the moment or performing in the ways that our masculinity often calls for.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chris, coming to you next. You work with a lot of young males, and I got another two-part question for you. Have you noticed young men dealing with suppressed or trapped emotions? If so, how would you define what a suppressed emotion is, and how do you help them in expressing themselves beyond the emotion of anger?
Yeah, again, I just gratitude for being on with such talented folks. Thank y'all for the work that you do. When I look at the suppressed end, we have to look at repressed emotions too. And before we look at those, I think it's important to kind of look at what defense mechanisms are. And I think we all have things that come into our life that are like different stimuli, whether they be positive or negative. And we tend to react to those in some way or another. The suppressed emotions, I think, are kind of more conscious, right? The things that we say, hey, I'm getting into an argument with my baby mama or my wife or my coworker. And so in terms of being conscious about that, we may take 10 seconds to breathe, right? Or we may walk away. The challenge, I think, are the repressed ones, because those are the ones that are subconscious. And a lot of times when we say trapped, we let these things show in a way that's not healthy, because we're not, as Obari and as Mike said, we're not being in that moment with the emotion to allow us the opportunity to kind of really let that shine, but in a way that it's constructive. And I think if we don't have a vision of what we want to see and what we want to be, right, then it's hard to really construct that. And a lot of these young adults out here are lacking what that vision could be of something positive. And so they're kind of pushing these emotions down instead of saying, man, I'm feeling this way, but I would prefer to feel this way so I could do A, B, C, and D to feel this way. But instead they're saying, I feel this way, so let me be angry about it. Let me be mad. Let me push it away. And if they're suppressing it, then that can be a good thing, because you're giving it a moment to really get clarity on it. If you're repressing it, then I feel that you're putting it in a place that can show up in other places in your life in very negative ways. So the one suggestion I give to our young adults is, first of all, have someone to talk to, right? And be able to express what you want to express with no judgment, first and foremost. And no judgment, that doesn't mean I'm not going to tell you what's wrong and what's right. It means I'm going to tell you what I feel is the best based on my experience and how I see you. And so, just in summary, I think that we have to make sure that we all go through things where we put up defenses, but I think it's really important to know what that feeling is in the moment and to really deal with that emotion. If you're mad about something, don't just be mad. Figure out what you're going to do to not drive yourself insane, right? They say doing the same thing over and over again is insanity. So find out what the better looks like, right? Versus being, what's becoming. How do you change that? So thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, Frank, you are an artist, yogi, and yoga teacher. In your opinion, how has the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, politics, violence, and the current state of our city, our nation, and the world played a part in the level of anger in our society today? In part two, what have you noticed? And is there a specific mindful breathing technique that you would recommend for those experiencing uncontrollable anger?
It's a huge question. It's a big question. And, it's probably something that we've all felt, the men on this panel and just society in general, I think. And it's kind of a simple answer. Like, I think we feel, short-tempered. I think we feel, as though our reactions are escalated quicker. And, that we've been quarantined, we've been kind of isolated a little bit. I'm finding extroverts turning into introverts and, just not being able to, figure out your communication skills and what those can do for you. I come to a mindfulness place after a few years of recovery. And so I gave up drinking about 6 years ago to kind of touch into Dr. Turner's field. That was something that allowed me to learn other coping skills. And I want to touch on something that he mentioned, Dr. Turner, the symptoms that you have that are underlying, these almost outwardly facing destructive patterns and behaviors that you have. We're not diving any deeper than that. You know, we have initial reactions and we jump at things. We have knee-jerk reactions, you know, that, you know, require just a little bit of reflection and consideration. And a lot of times we don't have that time, you know what I'm saying? So it takes an effort. I think someone on the panel said that it takes retraining yourself a little bit. And I hear a lot of times, you know, go with your gut, or the first reaction is usually the right one. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think that usually your second reaction is a little bit more considered, a little bit more thought out, and you've had a chance, you've taken a beat, you've gotten a breath in, you've considered a couple of consequences, and you know, you can then react in a way that is a little more thoughtful, a little bit more mindful. And so, you know, as we're getting out a little bit more, as the pandemic loosens up a little bit, we're getting into more social situations. It was mentioned, you know, it's going to be warm in Chicago, hopefully soon. And that I think just requires us to keep these things in mind, to really just take a pause when we've got the time, and train ourselves to do that. The second part of that question was the breath. And, you know, it's something that it's a lifestyle for me. It's something that I do. Of course, we all breathe, but it's conscious breathing that I'm talking about, and that I think we're all talking about. So, you know, I have two really good breathing exercises that I do. One is alternative nostril breath that many yogis are familiar with. And that's just, you know, covering up one nostril, breathing in, holding that.
We're going to do it later. So we're going to do it later.
I won't take you guys through it then. And then, you know, there's, in the Sanskrit tradition, there's Kalpapati breath, which is breath of fire. There's lots of different words for it, but it's also just more of a rapid breath. And you're almost hyperventilating a little bit. You're just taking it slow, but you're pushing the breath out and allowing the inhale to happen automatically. Kalpapati in the Sanskrit tradition is skull lightning. And so it instantly kind of gets you out of that reactive mode, and you're instantly more thoughtful. You know, we have all of those tools in us to use: the breath, the postures of yoga, and all of those things are just as good as any of the alcohol that you're drinking, or any of the other coping medicines or mechanisms that we use that can be a little bit more destructive. We have good, very intentional coping mechanisms already living in our bodies. So,
well, I wasn't going here next, but you talked about coping mechanisms, and now we're going to open up the rest of the questions to the entire panel, so anyone can answer this question. Do you feel that conscious breathing, meditation, yoga, finding alternative ways to deal with anger, do you feel like it's a coping mechanism, or is it something else? Anyone can answer.
This is Larry. I'll start with that. You guys didn't need me on here. You got all these talent here. What are you talking about?
Please,
wasting my time. I could be watching the game. Anyway, let me just say this. First, just a little bit about the brain. You know, the frontal lobe. This is where we make our quote unquote executive decisions. Develops faster in women. Okay, so for men, quote unquote, fully developed frontal lobe, it's not till you're in your late 20s, 30s. Seriously, and that's science. And some of us, we never fully developed up here. That's the one of the most important things. And as far as the breath, I think clinically, anytime you make your exhalation longer than your inhalation, that sends a signal to the rest of the brain to calm down, because that is a conscious effort, because the medulla, it regulates your body, your breathing perfectly. So when your anger is short and choppy, and when you're sleeping, it's slow and drawn out. And when you are able to consciously make the exhalation longer than the inhalation, that signals your brain, hey, what's going on here? And if you focus on the breath, because your mind can take you back into, well, I'm not using that technique. I'm angry. But if you focus on the breath, maybe have to drop the concentration down to your chest to visualize your lungs expanding. That's a proven technique that works if you practice and you take that with you. So yeah, meditation, deep breathing, on the spot is been a big part of my life, and we've successfully used that clinically inside psych units, at least the adolescent psych unit that I had with clients at the university. So yeah, I would say definitely the meditation and the breathing is excellent tool to keep you balanced.
Anybody else like to answer that question about it possibly being a coping mechanism?
I'll add
What, the breathing?
The breathing, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll add something, man. I think the word coping can sometimes get a negative connotation. I think we all do things to hopefully deal with the different stressors or the different stimuli that come into our life the best way that we can. I think that the best thing to do is whatever you can do to move forward in a progressive way, whether it's called coping, whether you call it going and exercising, whether you call it meditating. I think there's a number of different things. I think where a lot of people are challenged is they don't take that moment to figure out what that thing is to get them forward, because they don't know what forward is. They don't know what that vision is or where they're trying to get to. And I think really taking that time to find out, like, what do you want better in the situation, right? You want to just keep reacting on it? Or is there a vision of what you have better for that? That's a big reason I started the organization, Your Passion First. I think a lot of us lack what that vision is. And so then how do we deal with it in the moment if we're just dealing in the moment, right? And I think that's where it gets the negative connotation of coping. But I think when it's set on that vision, it's finding a way to solve that challenge to get to the next thing you're trying to get to.
Let me pick up on that. I think that there is a lot of power in the silence in the moment that the breath connects us to, that allows us to ascend beyond coping if we're doing it right. I believe that most of the there's a collective vision. There's us needing to come together, have elders, commune with our ancestors to allow for what we need to be and how our destiny is shaped to be influenced by all the things that because we're interconnected beings. I believe that there's a part of it, though, where we are planted our own insight, our own internal wisdom, sort of a seed inside of us that must be watered in silence, that the breath allows us a moment to be able to connect with those. You can call it intuition. The tradition I study called Urubus, we call it the Obari. There's a bunch of different ways to tap into this internal vision. I believe that the breath is required to be able to get into a space where you can listen to those messages, where you consider them coming from you or from angels or from Marisha or from God, whatever you consider that voice to be. And I think that our young people are in a world, and us too, like I'm inundated with, I wake up scrolling and fall asleep scrolling just like the young people do. I'm at a stoplight, my brain's wired, I get bored and I pick my phone up, just like, so because of that, the dings and the images and the stimuli is constantly coming at us. We're being bombarded with other people's images and other people's vision, and it's robbing us of the ability to be able to stay still long enough to find that vision in ourselves. And I think that wisdom, when we miss that, when we miss everybody's individual contribution to their internal wisdom, then we lose so much. Like, it's hard to even fathom how much we lose when we have generations of young people not being able to be bored for long enough to realize the effervescence inside of their breath, like to realize the beauty of the silence, just because we moving so quick. And so I believe that the breath is a mechanism that does more than coping. I think that the smoking weed is coping, right? I think the playing video games, I think there's other things that I would consider coping. I think the breath has more power than that, because it allows us to align with higher visions for self and for collections and for listening to voices inside of us that are vying for our attention, but we don't give them space to. And I think the breathing allows us to have a moment of pause for that specific cause.
Cool. Thank you. So we're going to go to our next question. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like people were afraid of your anger, or you were not allowed to be angry? So they were afraid of your anger or your rage, or you felt like you weren't allowed to be angry. Has that ever happened to you? Anybody on the panel can take this.
I'll jump in. You know, I don't know if it was my anger or my energy. I think that there was an expression that I wanted to have in that moment. And just to kind of set the tone, I was trying to present a Black History event at an organization that I worked at that was predominantly white. And the event that I was trying to present got shot down for something that I felt like was a little kind of beneath that for the month. So I didn't really know in that moment how to present it without being angry, but wanting to present something progressive and just present what I felt was the right thing to do in that moment. And so I could tell that some people were a little nervous in the workplace of like how I was reacting, how, you know, what I might do. And like, all I was trying to do was say, hey, this is what I think is the best thing. And y'all are presenting something that doesn't even come close. So I think in that moment had to learn that we are always presenting to an audience. And if we want people to hear what we're saying, sometimes we have to craft it in the way where it's going to be heard. We can't always just spew everything out in the way it's filtering right from our brain down into the moment. So I think it was a learning experience for me to learn how to control, whether we want to call it anger or emotion or whatever that was in that moment, but put it in a way constructive enough where my audience wanted to see that change that I was seeing too, versus only seeing the expression of emotion that probably would have came out had I just reacted. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else like to?
I'm sorry, Daryl. I'm sorry, I can't let you do this. I don't know. This wasn't my agreement that you were just asking questions. Everybody, we know each other. We've all worked together. So Daryl said he's gonna slide through this whole thing because about sitting by doing the
Not on
thing.
purpose. Not on purpose.
So I have a question for you. So your question, I think, is really relevant for all of us.
Okay.
And thinking about like how we message this Know Your Rights campaign for young Black men when they have police encounters. Right. So we know that's one specific moment where their life is in danger. And that's, you know, so we had to teach them like control their anger. That's one of the moments you can't mouth off. You can't move too quickly. You have to stay calm. Like this training of being in control and maintaining composure is something that a lot of our young Black men, because they don't have that, get themselves into more trouble. Sometimes actually lose their life because of it. But the message is always like, you know, it still feels this very much like deference to the authority, which doesn't feel good to nobody, particularly for men. Like, yes, sir, but, you know, okay, sir, just follow instructions, especially if they're wrong and you didn't do nothing, right? Or if you're not, whatever it is, like, you know, a cop should not be able to come talk to you any kind of way, and then we are forced to just have to maintain our composure to stay alive. It's just an unfair dynamic. How do you think that we should message this thing to young men that still leaves them feeling powerful and having agency, but also being able to leave the encounter alive and without not even losing their life, but like getting locked up or getting beat, whatever it is. There's so many consequences that could come from losing your control and demonstrating a justified anger in a moment when you actually don't have as much power in that interaction. How do you help mentor young people in this moment with all these dynamics?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is to acknowledge the ridiculousness and hypocrisy and telling young people that they need to show more emotional maturity than an adult. I think that's the first thing we got to do, is acknowledge the hypocrisy in that. Secondly, understanding, I think it's important for young people to understand that a lot of times your power is in your peace, and that you can that your power, your energy is so powerful when you're at peace that it can calm a situation down. So that in some instances, you may see your friend, getting a little upset and being treated unfairly or losing control of their temper. You can be the calming force in that. So I think you're able to tap into your energy of tranquility and inner tranquility the more you meditate, the more and yoga is a moving meditation, as we know, the more you enhance your wellness lifestyle and prioritize wellness when you first get up. When you first wake up, do you pick up a phone? Do you check your email? Do you check your social media? Do you go to the news? How do you distract yourself from yourself when you wake up? Because I think the first thing you should do is connect with self. I think that should be the first thing you do when you wake up, instead of distracting yourself from yourself. But I think we should be teaching young people that there is power in their peace. And I know it's easy to see the power in the anger. There's time to be angry, and you can still find control and be able to speak to someone and express that you're not appreciating how you're being treated in a very respectful way. A lot of times I think we feel like either it's rage or it's just complete capitulation, and when I think that it's not that black and white. So thank you for bringing me a part of this. I wasn't sure how to get in, Obari.
For me,
let me say something on that, Obari. And one of the things is in the teaching young men is you can role play. If you have a group of young men, you absolutely should role play stop being stopped by authorities and how that works. We are fortunate in one sense in that we have a lot of documentations, the videos, the phones that tape so many of these incidents. And so what I do is whenever I see something on television or CNN, I'll record it, bring my son in, and we'll look over it. How could we have avoided this? What's going on right here? How can you get out of this? What should you be doing? Or whenever I see something on the street and he's with me, and I'm saying, so look, so how would you play this? How are you going to go through this? So role playing with a group of young men, and what do you think this young man is feeling because he's bent over a car and the police are all up on him? One thing, you got to make sure you have all your quote unquote legal credentials in order. The other thing is, hey, the man's got a gun. Okay? The man's got a gun, whether he's white or black. And you have to respect the power of that. I believe that you do have to respect the power of that. Now, you also should have a way to vent your emotions after the incident. But many of our young people, remember I said about the brain development, are not able to take that feeling of powerlessness when being stopped by the authorities or being caught in something, and wait. And because it's difficult living in that anger situation or that frustrating situation. That's why people strike out. But when you put in a position where it's almost to your detriment to strike out, you have to practice role play. How are you going to live through this?
I was also just going to say back to, I think here's an important point. Anger as a benefit, does anger have any benefit for us? Can we show it, channel it into different situations? Obari, you brought up the Orisha, so I'm going to go back to a Yoruba tradition too. There's a tradition there where, it's just like any other culture, yin and yang, or in the Yoruba tradition, it is Ashe and Itutu, hot power and cold power, cool power, where we get be cool, from. But channeling that hot energy into places and being able to target that, I think is very important. It is what kind of moves you off of your comfortable positions. And in order to, it could be a little bit of a drive. So where can we take those negative stigmas about anger and kind of find benefit in them as well. And that, again, I'm going to come back to the breath. It always comes back to the breath in order to be able to become aware and channel that energy. So,
yeah, definitely, for sure. So let me ask you a question. We've talked about breathing. We talked about it in many different ways. What are some of the other benefits of breathing, other than just, being able to control your anger, or, some of the other things we said? What are some of the other benefits that you get from conscious breathing and meditation?
You're asking me?
Anybody that wants to answer? And I'll start by saying, for me, I get a lot of clarity through meditation. I get a lot of, I'm more focused and able to stay focused longer in the day. And my creativity is enhanced immensely. So it's a powerful thing. So that's why I asked that question.
I would say for me, I've used it, like Larry was mentioning before, one of the breathing techniques, just 2-to-1 breathing, where you're exhaling for longer than the inhale, just to relax. I've used that when I taught speech and debate, just as a technique for the kids to use to calm down before they would do a presentation or something, knowing that I needed that quite a bit myself when I had anxiety back in my early 20s and that. And then as I've gotten older, I love all the therapeutic benefits you get from yoga, from meditation, from breath work, where, like, with specific breathing techniques, as you guys were mentioning some of the other ones, there's another one called Ujjayi Breathing, which is like a slowed inhale and exhale. And I've used that to experiment with lowering my blood pressure. And it's just incredible. Like, I can get it down 10, 20, sometimes 30% in like 5 minutes of doing that. So that's been awesome. And then I've got, a couple of years ago, I got a Muse, it's kind of like a gizmo you wear to measure your brainwave patterns. And I can use my blood pressure monitor with the Muse 2 to figure out what my brainwave patterns are doing based upon my breathing and everything. And then Daryl, like you're mentioning, like there's a clarity, to me, it's cool to find the clarity that comes from just the breathing, but then knowing that it's not only affecting my heart rate, my blood pressure, but my brainwave patterns. That is something, like, for me, really tangible. And then when you talk about, or when I feel like anger or strong negative emotions are coming up, all those things like temper it for me, like that, the breath work. And then I know my blood pressure is changing. I know my heart rate is changing. I know that my brain is literally calming down, and, all those other good sensations that go along with it. It's fabulous.
Anybody else like to answer that question? What are some of the benefits you get from breathing, from meditation?
I can go. I'm new to yoga, so I added this comedic yoga to this wellness group we were doing on Sundays. And what I've really learned to appreciate about it is, because I'm in class and I'm in positions, and in real time, I'm like, why am I doing this? This is completely uncomfortable. I can only be mad at myself because I chose to be here and I put my leg there. But it's in that experience where I get to have intentional discomfort and use the breath to relieve that tension. And because I'm training my body to do that, when I'm in real life and something comes up that irritates me or causes tension, I have a quicker reaction to being able to breathe through it. Yeah. So it's like I'm practicing life difficulty through my body, but also training myself to respond to it in ways that are more centered and more calm. Yes. I also use it for my erectile dysfunction. No, I'm kidding. But it's fine. I say that to say this is my transition into how do we as men make this more appealing to men? How do we make it so that it's like cool? How do we, so that it's not, so mystical? We talk about the shooters. Like, how do we get the shooters to think that this is something that can benefit them, to make them feel stronger and not more, you know what I mean? I haven't been in a conversation with so many men that are into mindfulness and yoga and meditation, but at most of the places I go, it's mostly women. Women are into it. I have a black male do yoga session, and I have a hard time keeping the women from coming. And they come anyway. They come anyway, right? but I can't get the boys to show up. And when they do, they feel weird. There's something about it that feels weird. And, you know, and the instructor I got, Mike Wilson, is brilliant instructor. Sometimes he uses that kind of stuff to talk about being able to last longer, to be able to move your hips, right? To be able to you know, do these kind of things and that catches their attention. Like, oh, okay, I could. That's immediately useful for me in my life.
It's all core work.
But I wonder, what are some other things that y'all have done to make this appealing, cool, accessible? Is that a responsibility that we should have, or should we just wait for? You know what I mean? You say yes. You say yes, and how? What does that look like for you there?
Well,
Practice.
the first thing, how my meditation went to the next level is when I stopped trying to twist myself up into these little spaces and do like this and say, I mean, when I stopped doing that and really took ownership and said, I can meditate in the way I feel the most comfortable, that's when it took off and went to another level. So I lay down on my mat, on my yoga mat, and I meditate in that sense. And it, you know, it gets to the point where the ego just running. So that's the second thing is, I think most people believe that you have to calm your mind. And if you can't do that, then you can't do yoga. I used to think that. I actually allow my mind to run out. There are many ways. There's actually meditation techniques where you're trying to remember everything that crosses your mind. So I let the mind run out, and then I start hearing that divine whisper, is what I call it. And eventually, the more I do yoga, I found this secret door in my mind. And when I opened that door, it was like opening up a door to an ocean of infinite possibilities. So again, I'm a creative person. I'm an artist. It looks like I have crazy gray hair on my face because I'm actually shooting a film today. So that's why I look like this. And the creativity, I can't speak about it enough. So if you are a creative person and you want to enhance that creativity, then I would say meditate. And by the way, if you believe in writer's block, because I don't believe in writer's block, if you do, I think the meditation can help cure writer's block too. But I think that's the most important question of the panel, in my opinion. So I think other people should answer that question. How can we make it more appealing?
You know what? I would love to add to that. You know, I think there's a stigmatism around it, you know, and I think only in the past 15, maybe 10 years, it started to lose that. Like, what is this meditation thing? What is this kind of yoga thing? Like this weird thing people are doing. And like I had Daryl on a call for the PTO the other day, and I could still get that sense.
Yep.
Right. Because Daryl did an opening and I could still get that sense that people are like, what is this? Right. Like, why are we doing this at the minute? Where I feel like people are missing the mark is this, right? We're on this panel talking about breath, right? People fail to miss the mark in that the heart is the most important muscle in your body. And oxygen is the most important thing in your body. And if you can get more oxygen to that muscle to get to your body, then you can control your body in a more calm fashion, right? Whether that's meditation, even when I work out, right? Breathe out, breathe in, right? When I swim, breathe out, breathe in, right? And people think of it, oh, I got to do well, you're doing meditation and everything that you do if you're talking about extracurricular or physical activity. So why not take that physical way of thinking into times where it's not physical exercise, right? Where it's just you doing your lively things. You're like, man, I'm a little upset. Let me take 10 deep breaths and calm myself just like I would if I was working out, right? Just to bring more oxygen to the muscle, right? So it can go to the brain. So I think that a lot of our young adults still stigmatize it. And I think that we, as folks that know, it's not just a yoga thing. This is a life thing.
Yeah.
Just to keep saying that. This is the breathing is in everything, right? And whether you call it meditation, whether you call it breathing, whether you call it extracurricular activity, be conscious of what you're doing when you're breathing and know what vision that you're trying to get to in those breaths, I think is what's most important.
Yeah, definitely. There's some professions where breathing is important, like sharpshooters. A lot of that is breath. You know, it's so many different places. You know, high pressurized situations. The coolest customer can usually get the things done and adapt and be able to work. But if someone else would like to answer that question, go ahead.
I did a men's
Go ahead,
class over at Kusanya Cafe over in Inglewood, and I got my son and one of his frat brothers to come. I had to tell them that there was going to be some girls there, but you know, he shows up and there's not there, and I'm like, well, you're here now, might as well go ahead and, you know, do some yoga. So you know, a little trickery maybe.
Yeah.
That, and then also, you know, I think he's also found his own little spiritual, you know, journey right now, and so. And, you know, I will take a little bit of credit for that. But the biggest thing is that I'm just leading by example. So it's very hard to tell people and to try to convince people of things. Whereas if you are just living in a way that, you know, people feel like they want to know a little bit more about that, and how you do that, then you can kind of bring them in a little bit. You know, it's, what do they say? It's, acceptance by exposure or something like that. At any rate, you know, the other thing I was going to say was I think that Daryl said that, but to find the little things that you do throughout the day, and if you see that person doing that, like I see my son doing little things throughout the day, that I think that this a technique that I have could improve what he does. For myself, man, I walk into a room now and I forget why I went in there. I lose my focus daily, all the time, like throughout the day. And so yoga breathing is incredibly beneficial to, you know, if I don't want to just sit there and wait in that room and remember why I came in there, you know, I can breathe a little bit, and eventually the reason I came in there will come back. Or if I feel stressed throughout the day, you know, I'll sit on my mat for 5 minutes. Just turn everything off for 5 minutes and just listen, and breathe, and try not to get too attached to a particular thought. Let them flow, like Daryl was saying, but, you know, try not to attach myself to any of those. So I think all of that.
Yeah, you know, for one of the things that, you know, how to get more people involved or more men, I think you have to, it depends upon the age group that you're approaching. For instance, Cartman and one of the Sesame Street, Elmo. Cartman and Elmo have this wonderful 2-minute video on YouTube that I use with special ed kids at the school, and they're belly breathing, you know, and they show how he turns into a monster when he's angry and stuff. So things like that, you can attract them. I've talked with young men in a little older age group, and I tell them, I say, hey, you know, Derrick Rose does yoga, you know, football players do yoga, a lot of people, and here's what they do. It'll help you jump higher. Yeah, you know, put little stuff in there, you know, but you attract them. And yeah, that's what kept me in yoga like 25 years ago. There were a lot of women in there, and that so it was an attractive thing. But to get your body flexible and stronger, I think there's a lot of ways we can bring young men into it, and it should be part of the curriculum, you know, the school curriculum. And schools are very rigid, but you have an opportunity to intervene as well, you know, in some places.
No, I think it'll be dope if we had like coaches. We need to get coaches on these calls. The coaches require that before practice, the whole team is doing 5, 10, 15 minutes of a mindful meditation or whatever. I mean, that's the best way to get a direct access into these boys. And I think that what I'm challenged with larger, and this, I don't know if this is a question or not, but like really the metaphor that helped me be more open to the strength in yoga. Because when I first, you know, I had the same stereotypes in my mind that it was weak and it was slow. But like when we start doing it, you realize that it takes a lot of core strength, a lot of it takes a lot of mindful strength. And it's the kind of strength that's different than I think that men have in their minds. We think of us as like a rock, and we want to be that hard, you know what I'm saying? But when you think about the strength of water, you think about the flowing strength, the ability for water to carve out a mountain, it really becomes real strength versus fake strength to me. And when I'm able to have young people see that the strength that they're doing, particularly Black men, that we're posturing strength, that it's intimidation, right? It's a play, it's a performance of strength, and that there's actual real power, real strength in our bodies, in our traditions, in our rituals, in our breath, and being more like water than rock. So like that's the metaphor that I have in my mind. But in terms of practice, in terms of making that plain for them, it's been hard to help them see that connection. So some of the things you're saying, I think, are really, really, useful techniques. But if we can get to, like you say, have be a part of curriculum, have coaches being buying in, get influencers to be vocal about it. I think that's the next wave of the self-care, the mental health movement. Like people are talking about it, but this part of it, I think, is still lagging behind in some ways that could be really powerful for us.
Yeah, most definitely. So we're coming towards the end, and I want to give everyone another chance to speak. And so you have 3 minutes to talk to our audience and tell them whatever you'd like to tell them about mindfulness, yoga, breathing, anything you like to tell them. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'll go in the order that I see you in. So Mike, you can go ahead and go.
Okay. Again, thank you for, this has been awesome for me to be a part of this group and everything. And when Obari was talking before, one of the things that I think is important anywhere is having mentors like all of you to be a different kind of man in any community so that they honor you by participating in all these wonderful things. But 2 things I just wanted to add. One is when we were talking before about, coping mechanisms or skills, looking at, I always say, look at all the pranayama practices, all the breathwork practices as tools in your toolbox. There are so many different breathing techniques that can be taught for a variety of different physical, mental, and emotional benefits that my hope is that everybody who's watching this takes advantage of these teachers that are in front of us here and others in the community to begin to learn these techniques and begin to find out how much they help you physically, mentally, emotionally. The last piece is just, we talk about breath work in yoga, and I think one other avenue to think about is just the whole idea that it's, the formal name in Sanskrit is pranayama. And I think that resonates with a lot of people on the level of spirit, where you begin to think about, this is something you're expanding what we call that life force energy inside of you. And it's so easy to get angry and depressed and anxious and fearful and whatever those negative emotions overtake us. And we can help people see that, okay, there's something else in life that animates you. And I think that's how yoga connects from those physical things that we do. Like Daryl, you were saying before, and Frank was saying, how you go from the physical things down to those more subtle, energetic things, and it becomes like a spiritual practice as a result of that. So,
yeah.
Frank?
First of all, I'm surprised it's over already. I got so much more to say, but listen to, I've enjoyed this thoroughly. So thank you, brothers. If I can leave you guys with anything, I think it would just be that, I think people should listen to their gut a lot, but what I try to do is not take that first reaction, not take that knee-jerk reaction, and give it a beat, give it a pause, give it a breath, and see what comes after that. It is an immeasurably smarter response if you can do that every single time, I guarantee. So I won't take 3 minutes, but that's what I would leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Frank. Larry.
Yeah. Years ago, coming back from Vietnam, I was very angry, and person suffering from PTSD and trauma. Went to the VA, and I didn't want to sit in those groups and listen to those guys talk about Vietnam again. Came out, so I started running. Doing a little. What's the guys? What's the movie where the guy just kept running? And
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. So I started doing the Forrest Gump. And I started running marathons. And whenever I would get angry, I'd go outside on the lake and run. And that really helped to calm me down for that particular time. And so the running, I did that for 20 years. I started doing yoga. And it was another step, because I thought I was doing here I had found something that had helped to relieve that trauma. And then I found something better. And so now it was time to switch. from the marathon running to something else. And then I found this thing called, they call it mindfulness now, but it's meditation. And I look at someone like Kyrie Irving on the basketball court, or Zach LaVine. When they do those moves where they dive towards the hoop, they're meditating. He's not thinking about that. He does one or two moves and then it's just all just, what is he doing? He's just following that meditation, right? He's following his brain right into the hoop. That is the meditation. And I said, oh man, this is it. And through self-examination, I've learned to recognize when I'm off base. And that's about every other 5 seconds, I'm usually off base. That doesn't take, but I don't have to stay off base. But that's from a lifetime of examination. And if we can start to do a little bit of that playfully with our children, I think that'll be the best thing. And the thing about yoga and breathing, it fits into all spiritual practices and cultures. It's Islamic, it's Judaism, it's Christianity, it's atheist, whatever you want. It's you finding that spiritual connection within yourself, and it's not knocking anything else. Okay. Namaste, my brothers.
Thank you, Larry. Obari.
I also very much appreciated this conversation. Thank you all, brothers, for the work y'all doing and for having me here. I'm going to take Frank's extra minute. I have a lot more to say also. What I really appreciate about this particular group of folks is that y'all are challenging, and Dr. Turner, which you said it beautifully, that the work is to sense yourself, be in alignment with all the forces in the universe in the midst of real time and in regular life. Most of us don't have the luxury of taking months off, going on retreats, going on walkabouts, going on sitting in mountains and roads. And we have to do this as we being fathers. We got to do this in neighborhoods that got sirens blazing. We can't escape our regular lives to go find some peace somewhere else. We have to adapt and find that peace in the middle of chaos. And in the middle of such a chaos like America, we had a transition of power recently, but those forces that continue to design and organize against our success and our well-being are still in place. That if you're not angry as a Black man right now, then something's wrong with you. That I don't think that the message is to get rid of the anger. The message is to tap into it, direct it, control it, align it with something bigger than us, use it to redeem those harms done to us and our people that are continuing to be done. And if we think about ourselves as returning ancestors who are coming back again to experience living life on this planet and still fighting the same battles they were fighting centuries ago, generations ago, there's anger in us that some of it we can't breathe out. Some of it we've got to find other things to do to tap into other resources. And for me, I think it's because of that, it's important to connect some of the cultural practices and rituals. Y'all gave me the open door to mention Orishas again. And for me, it was important to bring Kemetic yoga into the space on the South Side with Black men coming. Because I think that there's a danger sometimes in having to look outside of ourselves and our culture for healing. I think that, the new wave, the new age, the Eastern, when we say other people's languages, if it's Indian or if it's Asian, if we can't find value in going back to Africa for healing principles, then there's always going to be a hole in us. There's always going to be something missing as we try to find out who we are and our identity and our sense of self in this planet. If we can't identify what of these things came from us historically. So because of that, I just wanted to add that there's a intergenerational dimension to this, that it connects us to always, I believe firmly in the tapestry of human diversity and the things that different people contribute. And I think that for those of us that are descendants of African people, it is imperative that part of our healing includes going back through the line that we come from and using the language and the practices and the rituals and incorporating that into mindfulness and breathing practices. Otherwise, the world will continue to convince us that we never gave nothing of value to the world. And so that, in that sense, we ourselves are not worthy, are not valuable. So I would implore us as Black, primarily Black men I'm looking at, to find the ways to tap into these practices, but using our own sort of framework for it. I think it makes a difference. I think it matters that we're connecting the breath to the deity of Oya, right? I think it makes a difference to even invoke her, to align the anger in our bloodline with the principle of Ogun that is in charge of warfare on the planet. And so in that way, if we make offerings to these deities, to these principles, then we can align our breath and our practice into something that's bigger than all of us. So it's not just coping, it's not just managing, it's not just making it through the day. It's really healing the intergenerational trauma that's happened to our people, which makes our work harder. We're not just breathing and having fun. It's not just going to work. It's not just raising our children. It's a bigger task that we have in front of us. So that's my challenge for me, and that's the challenge that I put forth to us as healers, as light beings, as brothers in this work, to keep that framework in mind. And I will end there. Thank y'all for your time and y'all brilliance and y'all, and again, for y'all work. Not even just talking about it, for doing the work.
Thank you, Obari. Appreciate that. Chris.
Sure.
Yo, just, man, mad love. I'm feeling mad energy from this crew here of just amazing people. So again, Sandra, thank you for bringing something so important as breath, right? That may come across as so simple, but that we sometimes fail to really just think of that simplicity and how it can make just our whole lives better. I heard maybe 4 themes. I heard vision today. I heard breathing, I heard anger, and I heard connection. So I'm gonna just try and sum it all up and how it came off to me and how I think it could be most beneficial to these young adults out there. When we look at breathing, I think it's important to look at how we connect with other people. And we can connect best in a calm state of mind. And if everything's heightened and I'm trying to connect and have a conversation with someone, then I don't feel that we can get to the true purpose of that conversation, the true vision. And so I think as we go out in the world and we connect with people in whatever way you could calm yourself, right? Breathing is the best thing to bring that oxygen to your heart so that it can go to your brain so that you can slow down your thinking. But there's other ways that we can use, whether it be coping or whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's being able to calm yourself so that you can project your vision and so that you can connect with other people and create that connection, create that vision. I think a lot of our young adults struggle there because they have anger, because they are resenting who they really want to be, right? When you're pushing away the person you know that you can be, right? You living in things like, oh, I'm out on the block doing this, or I'm working this job I don't really like. That's not you becoming, that's you just being something. And so we have this anger that becomes repressed and we push it away because our parents are telling us to do this. Our environment saying we can only do this. And so I think the best advice I have for these young adults, first of all, believe in yourself, right? Second of all, take a moment, breathe it out and try and figure out what vision it is that you're trying to set. And then lastly, connect with those people around you, connect with your community. Most importantly, connect with yourself, right? Know what you are trying to become, not what you are, not what you were, right? Don't live in that shit, right? Excuse my language, Mom, I love you. Live in what you are trying to become and think about that every day and breathe it out and always sit in that moment of that, right? Don't sit in this drama. So I'll leave it at that. Again, much love. I appreciate y'all and I appreciate the energy.
Thank you,
Chris. I'm ready to sign up now.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I'll just share a testimony for you. So at 39, I was 275 pounds. I was driving for Lyft 70 hours a week, eating out of drive-thrus. I was obese and I was heading for a heart attack. And I needed a spark and I refound yoga. And when I first started going, I would come into class with a lot of road rage, constant frustration and irritation. And it was uncomfortable. It was a lot more challenging. than I remember. And it seemed like everybody knew what pose was coming next. It was very intimidating. It seemed like everybody was looking at me. But what I noticed was after class, how I felt, how at peace I felt, how that road rage was gone, that frustration and irritation was gone. And so that's what kept me coming back. And eventually I started enjoying the class. I started getting to know, and I got better and I got stronger. It became the foundation of my transformation. And now I'm able to take my anger and not just suppress it or push it away, but sometimes I can transform it into something, into action, into something more positive. So I invite you to figure out how to do that for yourselves. And we'll go ahead and take you through a quick breathing exercise. This is something you can do. It's a few seconds, and it can help you just calm yourself down. And so you can maybe find clarity and just navigate this life a little better. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your right thumb, place it on your right nostril. So what we're gonna do is gonna inhale through our nose, through our left nostril, and then exhale through our left nostril. Here we go. Inhale. And then exhale. Now, before we inhale again, we're gonna inhale just like we did, but then the breath coming out of the left nostril is gonna be a choppy type of breath, like a ch, but coming out of the left nostril. Here we go. Inhale through your left nostril. And then exhale choppy. So you can't breathe anymore. Good. Take your left thumb, put it on your left nostril. We're gonna inhale through our right nostril. Here we go. Inhale. This time, inhale again through your right nostril, and then it comes out choppy. Let's go. Inhale. And exhale out choppy. Good. So think about how you feel. If you feel better, this is something that you can use as we go forward. I'd like to thank Love and Like Kindness. I'd like to thank our wonderful panel, Chris, Frank, Larry, Obari, and Mike. And I will turn it back over to Love and Like Kindness. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone on the panel. I really appreciate your time and the information that you shared with our audience today. We have people that are talking to us on social media that have some questions, and they're asking about a part 2. So we will work on a part 2. We will see how that works out. Send us your questions. Tell us what questions you still have that you want to know about. And we will see if we can work towards that. Also, remember to like, follow, share. Next week, we have a panel of women who are also speaking about anger management because the conversation doesn't stop with the men. So please join us for next week. And again, if you can help us to keep our programming free, please consider doing that as well. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Cassandra Powell with the Light of Loving Kindness. Bye.